What's up, guys? How's it going? Good. Um, well, welcome back. It's been a crazy day for me, but I'm actually super glad to be here. This has been actually just a very inspirational study for me. It's been super cool to dive deeper in this book. I think this is my fifth time now reading it, but I've already learned so much. It's really cool for me how the principles and the concepts from this book just keep getting better and better and better. I'm more able to present them, to understand them, and that way I can explain them in simpler terms and simpler ways. So, anyways, really cool. Today we're doing part 2 of principles of growth and change. So yesterday we talked about as part 1 of principles of growth and change about a lot about character ethic. And how we have to move from level 2 to level 3 to level 4 to level 5, and especially in emotional and spiritual levels. That a lot of times we can see this growth process in playing the piano or getting good at sports, but it's so much harder to take responsibility for and to see this growth process on an emotional level or on a spiritual level. So we're going to go on to part 2 of this. So this is really cool. It says here, I remember violating this principle myself as a father many years ago. One day I returned home to my little girl's 3rd-year birthday party to find her in the corner of the front room, defiantly clutching all her presents, unwilling to let the other children play with them. The first thing I noticed was several parents in the room were witnessing this selfish display. I was embarrassed, and doubly so because at the time I was teaching university classes in human relations, and I knew, or at least felt, the expectation of these parents. So already when I'm seeing there, and we're going to go into this a little bit later after the story, but the first thing he notices, it's interesting how the first thing he notices is not his child, but it is rather the parents and his perception of their opinions of him. At this point in time, he doesn't actually know what they're thinking about him, but he's making a best guess on what he thinks they're doing, and he thinks they're judging him, which is why he feels embarrassed, and doubly so because he was teaching university classes in human relations. Continuing on, he says, the atmosphere in the room was really charged. The children were crowding around my little daughter with their hands out, asking to play with the presents they had just given, and my daughter was adamantly refusing. I said to myself, certainly I should teach my daughter to share. The value of sharing is one of the most basic things we believe in. So I first tried a simple request. Honey, would you please share with your friends the toys they've given you? No, she replied flatly. My second method was to use a little reasoning. Honey, if you learn to share your toys with them when they're at your home, then when you go to their homes, they will share their toys with you. Again, the immediate reply was no. I was becoming a little more embarrassed, for it was evident I was having no influence. The third method was bribery. Very softly I said, Honey, if you share, I've got a special surprise for you. I'll give you a piece of gum. I don't want gum, she exploded. Now I was becoming exasperated. For my fourth attempt, I was resorted to fear and threat. It's interesting how with each attempt, he gets more and more frustrated. As his expectations aren't being met, and as this embarrassment of being embarrassed in front of their parents becomes more and more real and bigger as this draws on, he gets more and more lower on the emotional level, where he cares more and more about his own reputation rather than the care and the character of his child, or her feelings and her emotional level. So it says here, for my fourth attempt, I resorted to fear and threat. Unless you share, you will be in real trouble. I don't care, she cried. These are my things. I don't have to share. And finally, I resorted to force. I merely took some of the toys and gave them to the other kids. Here, kids, play with these. Okay, now, if you've kind of zoned out because of the story, zone in now. This is where it gets important. this is where this section matters. He says, perhaps my daughter needed the experience of possessing the things before she could give them. In fact, unless I possess something, can I ever really give it? She needed me as her father to have a higher level of emotional maturity to give her that experience. But at that moment, I valued the opinion those parents had of me more than the growth and development of my child and our relationship together. So he sacrificed the growth and development of his child and their relationship to, or at least for, the opinions of these parents. And might I add, it's an illusioned opinion, a deceptive opinion, because he doesn't know their true thoughts or their true feelings or true opinions of him. They don't actually know that, or he doesn't actually know that, but he's assuming what they are. Now, this is where it gets really good. So listen to this. Perhaps I superimposed a higher level expectation on her simply because on my own scale, I was at a lower level. I was unable or unwilling to give patience or understanding, so I expected her to give things. In an attempt to compensate for my deficiency, I borrowed strength from my position and authority and forced her to do what I wanted her to do. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. First off, he talks about this superimposing a higher level expectation because he's operating from a lower level. So what I love about that, especially in like the emotional realm, is if we're operating under a lower level of emotional strength, we assume that everyone else above us or everyone else around us has to act at a higher level of emotional control or strength or maturity because we lack patience and understanding. So we get frustrated that people aren't doing the things they should be doing. But if we were operating at a higher level, at a higher emotional level, or a higher character, a higher position of like true patience and understanding, we would actually recognize that we're not all perfect human beings and that we all have our own journey to travel. And through that patience and understanding, we could actually seek to help other people make, like, instead of expecting them to be perfect, we would just expect them to like perform at their level, or at least we would understand where they were at and not get frustrated with them, but rather seek to help them. I hope that makes sense. It makes sense to me. And so but because of his lack of patience and understanding, so he was more worried about the opinions of others and about getting the situation under control, that he superimposed a higher level expectation. But because of that deficiency in his emotional strength, he compensated for it by borrowing strength from a position of strength and authority. So he's the parent over the child. This also happens with like managers over employees, or like government officials over citizens, right? Where like they should actually be the servant, the guide, not this like dictatorial figure. And so any like inspiration or admiration or strength or like power should be derived from a character standpoint, not from a title or from reputation or from a social status or from your net worth. Like none of those things actually matter, and they shouldn't give you any strength from your position or your authority. So like your strength should be purely derived from your knowledge of who you are, your unique talents and abilities, and your character, and your unique mission in your life, which we'll talk about later. But there's this idea of like don't borrow strength from position. Oh, don't borrow strength from position and authority. It says here. Oh, and here's why. Here's why. But borrowing strength builds weakness. It builds weakness in the borrower because it reinforces dependence upon external factors to get things done. So, like, for example, let's say that you were a manager and you use that position as manager to direct your secretary to get things done. Well, you're borrowing strength from that. She's not doing those things because of the relationship or because of who you are, because she's like loyal to you, but because she just needs to get paid. And then she's going to do it so she gets paid. But there's no real strength there. And so it builds that weakness. That there is no relationship. There is a much higher potential there that's not being tapped into. It builds weakness in the person forced to acquiesce. I'm not sure what that word is. It builds forced to acquiesce. Stunting the development of independent reasoning, growth, and internal discipline. So it's going to stunt the growth in that secretary. Why? Well, because she's not being told or she's not being given the opportunity to use her own independent reasoning or thought or internal discipline or even growth. And finally, it builds weakness in the relationship. Fear replaces cooperation, and both people involved become more arbitrary and defensive. That's super true. It becomes this downward spiral to where the manager tells the secretary to do things, right? Superimposes or borrows strength from a position and authority. And the secretary doesn't do it because of the relationship or because of loyalty or because of who that manager is, but she does it just to get paid so she can take care of her needs. Now, there is no relationship there, so there's no joy there, so it builds weakness there. He doesn't develop that character, and she doesn't develop this independent reasoning or internal discipline that stunts her development and her growth as a secretary to become really good and passionate about what she does. So it lacks that passion, right? So all three of those things, the secretary, the manager, and the relationship, are weakened because someone borrowed strength from position and authority. Fear is going to replace cooperation, and both people become arbitrary and defensive. What happens there is, let's say the manager tells the secretary, hey, look, this could even be with parent and children, right? Where the manager tells the secretary, do this. And let's say she messes up, right? Now, he's going to justify his weakness by blaming her. And as she receives that blame, or whether verbally or subconsciously by how the manager acts, what's going to happen is that secretary is actually going to then justify her weaknesses and justify that event by the weakness of the manager, that he doesn't have the character, and then he's a slothful manager, and then he doesn't care about her. And so they're both right, but they're both blaming the situation on the other one and justifying their own weaknesses. No one's taking responsibility, and it's a downward spiral where it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. Continuing on, Stephen Covey says, and what happens when the source of borrowed strength, be it superior size or physical strength, position, authority, credentials, status symbols, appearance, or past achievements, changes or is no longer there? Yeah, let's say someone gets a world record and they're super famous, all this attention, but then somebody beats them. Well, it's gone. All that influence they had is shattered, destroyed, it's gone. It's not there anymore. He says here, had I been more mature, I could have relied on my own intrinsic strength, my understanding of sharing and of growth, and my capacity to love and nurture, and allowed my daughter to make a free choice as to whether she wanted to share or not to share. Perhaps after attempting to reason with her, I could have turned the attention of the children to an interesting game, taking all that emotional pressure off my child. I've learned that once children gain a sense of real possession, they share very naturally, freely, and spontaneously. My experience has been that there are times to teach and times not to teach. When relationships are strained and the air charged with emotion, an attempt to teach is often perceived as a form of judgment and rejection. But to take the child alone, quietly, when the relationship is good, and to discuss the teaching or the value seems to have much greater impact. It may have been that the emotional maturity to do that was beyond my level of patience and internal control at the time. I really like how Stephen Covey talks about his own weakness in this book. How he opens up and says, here's a great example of when I operated under a low emotional level and expected a higher emotional level, and what happened to my daughter, my beautiful, precious child, and what I should have done, or what I could have done that was better. But it's really cool here. So I'm very fascinated with this, with teaching, especially gospel related principles or spiritual things, or even these character standpoints, which is also why I'm doing this book. But it's really, really interesting, this idea of teaching, where there are times to teach and times not to teach. So when relationships are when there's a fight going on, or in the midst of arguments, when emotions are high, he says it might not be the best time to teach then. It actually might not be the best time to try to operate from that higher emotional level, because you probably aren't. But when things calm down, when things are quiet, you take the child alone, or the employee alone, or secretary alone, and then you're able to discuss it at a more calming level, then you can really exercise that patience and understanding. It's a lot easier too. And so essentially you're setting yourself up for success. I really like that, actually. Perhaps a sense of possessing needs to come before a sense of genuine sharing. Perhaps a sense of possessing needs to come before a sense of genuine sharing. Many people who give mechanically or refuse to give and share in their marriages and families may never have experienced what it means to possess themselves, their own sense of identity and self-worth. Really helping our children grow may involve being patient enough to allow them the sense of possession, as well as being wise enough to teach them the value of giving and providing the example ourselves. What I think of there is this idea of agency and their choice. So many times as parents, as executives, as managers, as leaders, we, with good intentions, impose these rules and regulations that ultimately give the vibe or the impression that they're sucking the agency or choice out of people, and they're forcing them to do these things, when in reality it is their choice. And so sometimes people have this desire, I genuinely believe that people have this desire to give back, to contribute, to put in all their time, energy, efforts, passion, heart, spirit, body, mind into projects, into work. But they just need a sense of possession of that choice. And as soon as we take that sense of possession away, they cling onto it. And they all of a sudden don't do what we want them to do. It's for example, if I have the idea that, I'm going to go clean my room, all of a sudden I want to go clean my room. But then if I have that desire and my mom comes in and tells me, Josh, go clean your room, then it's frick, no, I don't want to, right? And so it's I don't have that sense of possession before I can really give of myself and really contribute and work and put in that passion and energy. And so that goes into principles of growth and change that operating, especially in the emotional areas and spiritual areas of our lives, that we have to take one step at a time, and that we have to go from level 2 to level 3 to level 4 to level 5. But we also, and to not borrow strength from position and authority, but to borrow it from our own intrinsic strength, our own intrinsic worth and potential. So yeah, guys, that's it for this section. Super excited to be able to share that with you guys. this whole idea of giving agency, giving people opportunities to exercise that agency, of possessing before needs, and that like we're able to do that when we operate at a high level or a high emotional level, which derives itself from character and from who we are, is like super powerful. And so just taking a real good look at ourselves and becoming self-aware of who we are and what we're capable of, and especially how we operate on an emotional level with relationships with other people, is like just super impactful. And I know I keep saying this, like, it's impactful, it's powerful, it's awesome, it's amazing, but like it truly is. It's literally changed my life. And I'm gonna be honest, like, honestly, if you don't even like care, like that's totally fine. Like I'm doing this mainly for myself. And so yeah, like honestly, it doesn't matter. You're bleeding capital if you don't apply these principles. But I love you guys. Have a great day and enjoy.